Okay, so in previous episodes, we saw how we can actually build out our Power Platform environments, set up our application, and then be able to create all the Azure DevOps conditions necessary to connect to that platform. So we set up our service connection, etc. Today, we're going to see how to build a pipeline. So I'm going to start out by going to my DevOps environment. And here's my ALM project that I had set up. So the first thing is we need to actually configure a pipeline for this. And as you can see, we currently don't have any pipelines. So we're going to create pipeline here. Once we get here, what we want to do is we actually want to build a new pipeline using our classic editor, because although you could use YAML to set up the pipeline itself, there is no specific YAML component for Power Apps. So what I'm going to do here though is I'm going to actually set up this based on Azure Repos, and I'm going to just hit continue here, accepting the default. So I'm going to actually accept the default repository, etc. What we want to do here is, again, there is no specific template for Power Platform, so I'm just going to click to set up an empty job. And what we can do here is we can define the name for this. So for this, I'm going to actually set up a name called export from development. And that's going to be the first pipeline that we're going to set up. Then we have the agent job itself. And that agent job, you can change the name for the agent itself. So we could call this, for example, build development pipeline. Okay, so that's basically what we're going to do here. And one of the things that we want to be able to do with this particular agent is we want to allow it to run the scripts to access the OAuth token. That's just because we need to be able to authenticate against various components, including environments and repositories. So we need to actually be able to have the agent do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a task. And as you can see here, that task, we're going to filter everything that has Power Platform. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually install all the Power Platform tools. So that's the first thing that we need to do in our environment. Nothing else, nothing more. There isn't any specific setup or configuration for this particular task. So we can proceed and move on to the next task. Now that we have the tool installer in place, our next task will be, we're going to click here to add one more, and that's going to be the export solution. So we want to actually export the solution from our current environment, and that's the one I'm going to click here to add. And as you can see, there are some settings needed for this particular one. So first things first, we need a service connection. So we defined that in our previous video, but in my particular case, I'm using MFA. So I had to set up a service principal or a service connection that had access to a service principal. And that service principal then needed to an application user on the Power Platform side to be able to talk to my application registration in Azure. Again, I'm going to set up a supplementary video to this just to go through that one part. But for now, we're going to select a service principal. And I'm going to choose the ALM dev connection that I set up. Now, the solution name, we're going to probably be using this throughout the entire pipeline and defining additional pipeline components. So what we want to do is we don't want to hard code the solution name. We actually want to use a variable for that. And I'm going to add a variable called solution name. And when in doubt about the solution name, what you want to do is you want to actually go to your Power Apps environment. And if you want to take note of the particular solution, then you're going to click here on environments. And in this case, that solution is in my ALM dev environment. And I'm going to just click here on the solutions. As you can see, this is my ALM solution. The name that you want is this one, not the display name. So I'm just going to copy this here and come over here in this set of variables and put in the value for that variable. Then I'm going to circle back over to the tasks. And here, what I want to do is, instead of hard coding then the solution name, what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer to that solution name variable that I just set up. And for that, you actually use the $sign and open parentheses, and you put the name of the variable and you close parentheses. Okay. For the solution output file, what we want to do then is we want to actually use one of the standard system variables that are available in order to actually get the artifact staging directory. So we are going to want to put this out in, and by the way, if you click on these ellipses, you could definitely see the different paths, and you could actually set up a folder if you wanted to where you would set that up. But I don't want to hard code that, so I want to actually use a global variable called build.artifact staging directory. So this basically allows me to get to the staging directory, and I'm going to use the solution name in this case now as part of the folder that I'm going to set up. Solution name, and I'm going to append the .zip extension for this particular output folder. The next thing then that we want to do is we actually want to, once the solution is being exported and we've created this zip file, what we want to do then is we want to add a new task, and that new task is going to allow me to unpack the solution. So I'm just going to type in power here, and then you're going to see there's a power platform unpack solution. So we're going to add this task. And again, this task requires some particular settings. So I'm just going to click here. And the thing that we need to do now is we need to set up the input file. In this case, that input file is going to be the same output file from here, from this previous step. So I'm just going to go here and I'm going to type or copy paste that artifact staging directory solution name. But the target folder to unpack it will be the $sign build, and we're going to use the sources directory. So that's where we're going to unpack it in. And for that, we're going to actually target the solution name. So what is this basically doing? This is basically taking this and putting it into source code control for me. In other words, I'm going to actually use my repository to unpack the solution and basically set up my source code control files for my project. So that's very important because we need to be able to keep track of the different components that are going to be a part of the solution. And one of the purposes of ALM certainly is to set up your source code control repository. Key here is the type of solution that we're going to do. And in this case, we will actually want to ensure that this is an unmanaged solution. Again, if you are going to save files to your source code repository, you want to make sure this is unmanaged. The next thing then that we want to do, probably this is a good segue to go ahead and save this. You can completely skip the comment. The folder itself is going to be the target folder that we have in this case. That's going to be our default project folder. So we're just going to hit close here and hit save. Nothing uncharacteristic with that. The other thing that we're going to do is then we're going to add a new task. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to add a command line task, because what we're going to do with this command line task is to execute a few scripts that will then unpack our application into the automatic build process. So in this case, the only one thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to replace this for my specific account. And this is going to set up an automatic build for me. And the artifacts that I'm going to set up are going to use the actual token that I currently have in order to produce the build for me. So once I'm done, there is this option to save and queue. And what save and queue will do is, first of all, it will save my build pipeline, but it will also then queue up the agent in order to execute the tasks that are going to be performed by this agent. So I can set a comment to save this thing. I'm going to just leave it as is. And you can enable any system diagnostics depending on what you want to track as far as diagnosis. It's always a good thing to track the diagnostics while you're building the pipeline, but I'm going to skip that for now and I'm going to click Save and Run. So as you can see here now, this is taking me to the pipeline execution where I can monitor this pipeline being run. And I'm going to click here on Build and Development Pipeline. And that's going to show me then how this pipeline is being executed. So the first thing that it does is actually download the Power Platform tool installer. So that's basically a set of XRM components that are going to get added to my agent. Okay, now we're going to export the solution, and that is basically using the application user. And note that we actually had an error in this particular task, the Power Platform Export Solution task. So if I click here, what it's telling me is there is a user with ID 526 blah 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 that has not been assigned any roles. Well, this happens at the platform level. So what we want to do is we want to go back to the Power Platform Admin Center. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com, and we're going to look for my specific development environment. So that's ALM Dev. And what I want to do is I want to go to Settings, and I'm going to select Users plus Permissions because chances are that's what happened. And I'm going to look for users here. I'm going to want to click on Manage Users in Dynamics 365. So that's the one that I'm looking for. And there is a specific user down here called Development User. That's the application user we set up to manage or to communicate through our app registration in Azure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Manage Roles here. And if you notice, this particular user does not have a role set up. So for now, I'm just going to give it a system admin role. You can actually give it any role that you see fit that will actually help you with controlling security to your environment. So, but in this case, I am not hung up on that right now. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back and I'm going to click on Export from Development Environment. And we're going to rerun this particular pipeline. So we're going to run the pipeline again and then just click Run here. So that should basically execute the whole pipeline over. And I just want to go to Build Development Environment so you can see the job and the task being executed once more. And yes, the entire pipeline is going to be re-executed. So you want to actually have a little bit of patience here and just follow through, making sure everything is executing properly. Okay, this is the part where we had the error previously. So we will see this. Now we should have success with this because we assign a specific role to that application user. And that will allow me then to connect to my environment and transfer the files that I need. In this case, the project file. So we can see that this was successful. And we know by this green check mark. Now the Unpack solution worked perfectly and the script was executed as well. And we can then now go to the first place where we can go in actuality is here in our repos and select files. Now we should see all the different project files for the Canvas app and any other files that are involved in this particular set of on this particular Canvas project that we set up. Okay, so that basically is the first part for this ALM project, and we'll see now how we can move the rest of the application through the cycle. So now that you saw how we can export a solution and create a repository with that solution and a build pipeline from our development environment, now we're going to see how we set up a build pipeline to actually publish to our QA environment. We're going to also produce the artifacts that are required to deploy that particular solution into a production environment. So the first thing I want to do here is I'm going to set up a new pipeline. And that new pipeline is going to be, again, a pipeline that's going to allow us to move the files over from the repository into our QA environment. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this one up as a build QA environment files. What we're going to do here is we're going to use the same setup as we had before. We have an agent already set up for us. So I'm going to do is add the task that we need for this particular one. So again, the first thing you must do is you must install the Power Platform tool installer. Remember that all this does is it installs all the XRM tools required to perform any operation in your Power Platform environment. For example, create a solution, move the files within the environment, etc. So this one doesn't have any configuration requirements, so we're just going to leave it like that. And what we're going to do then is we need to pack the files that are in the repository. So we're going to just choose Power here again, and we're going to scroll down a little bit, and then we're going to pack the solution. So all this is doing for us really is going to take the source code control files that we have and package them into a solution zip file. So they are ready to be moved into the environment, in this case, the QA environment that we're setting up. So we want to point to the source of the files. And remember that we have some general global system variables that keep track of that. So we're going to use the sources directory and the solution name. And again, variables are specific to pipelines. So what we want to do here is we want to add that variable again called solution name. And remember that from our previous section, our solution name is called ALM solution. Returning back to the task, we can then complete the solution output file. So we want to put that in our build artifact staging directory. And we're just going to append the .zip extension to it because our solution files obviously use a zip extension and are recognized by the platform with a zip extension. Once we've actually packed that solution, we want to import it into our QA environment. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a new task, and search for Power. And that should allow me to see the Power Platform import solution. Here we go. Actually, it's the first task in the list. So I'm just going to click on it now. Again, my environment supports MFA, so I want to actually set up a service principal that uses this QA connection here that I've set up. And again, remember, I'm going to create a video specific to how you set up that service connection. But for now, that is the one that I'm using to create or to connect to my QA environment in Power Platform. What we want to do for the input file is we want to select the staging directory from the previous step. So all we can do is we can go back here and just select this one and just paste it right in here. So basically that's going to be my solution input file. So the product of this output is actually the input in this particular case. And what I'm going to do then is once I've imported this solution into my QA environment, if I want to then create some artifacts that are going to be deployed in production, what I then need to do is I need to grab those same files that I just imported into my QA environment, and I want to then export that solution once more and allow me to create some artifacts with those files that I'm exporting. So for that, I'm going to add a new task, and that new task is going to be your Power Platform. And then again, we're going to select the export solution. So here's my export solution. Okay, and this needs some configuration. Where I want to choose the file to be exported from will be my QA environment in this case. And the solution name is nothing more than the one that we've been toying around with. So remember that here, we're going to choose the solution name. So from my QA environment, I gotta select the solution that we've been playing around with. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna export this solution as a managed solution. So the first thing I wanna do is I wanna append the _ managed.zip to my solution output file. And then I specifically want to target this as a managed solution. And remember, what we're doing here is we're exporting this solution from our QA environment, and then we are staging it as a managed solution to be deployed in production. And basically what we're doing is we're leveraging the artifacts that are coming out of this. Again, we're going to click here to add a new task. And in this case, we're going to just type the word publish artifact. The one that we want is this one because this is coming from our build artifacts. And as you can see, this is just a drop. And we don't need to make any changes here. The only thing I want to notate is you can also publish this to a file share if you want to. And when you choose a file share, you then have to set up a path as indicated, and you can use some system variables for that as well. Okay, so that in essence complete the steps to work through this particular agent that is going to then build the QA environment files. And what I want to do then is I want to save this and queue it so you can see how this works. Now here I have my agent, which is in preparation mode. And now the agent is initializing. The tools are being installed. So again, those are all the XRM components. Okay, now the platform is packing the solution itself. And remember, that's being written from our repository. And now the solution is being imported into our QA environment. And now it's being exported from our QA environment. And now the artifacts are being published. So that's pretty cool. That job is complete. So we're good to go. We can actually go back to Power Apps, do a little refresh here. And then we can see that our ALM solution is now part of that QA environment. We can then just specifically highlight this one and publish the customization so folks can start the process of testing this particular solution and its components, whether that's an app. We can go from there. Back in Azure DevOps, we can then see that now we have two pipelines. So if we go here, we will have the export from development and we have the build QA environment files. Those are the two pipelines we've created so far. Okay, now we need to set up our release pipeline, which will allow us to deploy all the artifacts from our build stage out to production. So for that, I'm going to click on releases right here. There's no new pipeline setup, so I'm just going to click new pipeline. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an empty job. And this stage is going to be called production. Okay, you can call it production, deployment, whatever. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up an artifact. And that's going to be a build artifact. And basically the environment is pretty much the project is pretty much the one we're working on. And the source for this will be our build QA environment files. Remember that in this particular environment is where we actually decided to deploy the artifacts. So for this, all I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up as build. That's going to be my source alias. And I'm going to add that to my current designer, my pipeline designer. The next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to click on the production task. And now we see that we have an agent very similar to how the traditional build pipelines work. Now I'm going to add a task, and the first task obviously is the Power Platform tool installer. That is actually pretty much required for every single agent or every single pipeline that you're doing. We first need to download the XRM tools into the agent that's going to do the installation or do the deployment for us. The next thing that we want to do is we actually want to add the Power Platform import solution. So that's the next task that we're going to add. And that's going to require some setup. We're going to point to a service principal as authentication type. And I'm going to point to the production connection that I already set up. Now, as far as solution input file, what we want to do is we want to actually get the actual managed zip file that we previously created. So we are going to type or set up the system.default working directory build drop solution name manage zipped .zip. And as you can tell here in the variables, I probably need to set up a variable called solution name. And that's going to be my ALM solution, as you already know. We are going to leave the scope set to release, and that's probably all we need for now. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit save here. And then we are going to just save this in the default folder. And again, this could be all pipelines in this case. So we're going to save it right here. All right. Now what we want to do is we want to set up a new release. And to set up a new release, I'm going to go ahead and click on create release. And as you can see, this is targeting production. And the artifacts, those are going to come directly from the build source that we set up previously. So I'm just going to go ahead and click create here. And that basically brings us to the new release pipeline setup. So that's where we are for now. Okay, so if we click on the release summary page, the Power Platform Tools installer is being deployed right now. And we can see all our steps execute in this nice graphical user interface. I can always click on this and see a summary of the deployment process. In this case, is running the Power Platform Tools installer. And I can see all the commits if I want. I can see all the work items. All of these things are being presented in this very nice redesigned user interface that allows me to see all the completion of the release process. Note that I'm also presented with the build number, and this is build 580. That is actually being taken from my environment directly. Okay, so we actually have a failure on the agent itself. And again, I think we're familiar with this error. So all we have to do is go back to our Power Platform Admin Center. So that's admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com. And then we're going to go and select our ALM production environment. And we're going to go to settings. And once again, we're going to choose users and permissions and select users here. And we're going to manage those users in Dynamics 365. So my user is a production user. I think we can just click here. And here's the production user account that I'm using. Actually, what I want to do is highlight this and manage roles. And again, assign it a role that is akin to allow it to build this particular pipeline. So now that I have that in place, I can go back and pretty much go back through the deployment stage, or redeploy actually. And redeploy will allow me to run that specific pipeline from where it is. Now we can see the fourth stage completed. So the third stage or the third task just went through. And this one is actually importing the solution into our production environment. Okay, so the deployment succeeded. The way we can double check that again is if we go to the Power Apps environment, in this case ALM production, and click here on the solutions option. So now we can see that here's our ALM solution. And the first thing we'll encounter is that we cannot edit the components within the solution because obviously it's a managed solution. So what we can do, however, is publish these customizations to make them available. And if we actually go under apps, you will notice that the expense application does not appear. That means that it needs to be shared. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is go under the admin center. This is going to be slightly different. And that's because the user that is actually used to publish this application into production is the application user that we set up for the environment. So now what we want to do is we want to select our ALM production environment here. And then we want to click on the resources. And of course, you have to be an environment admin to do this. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm then going to select this expense application and I'm going to share it with myself. In this case, I'm going to just enter my user ID here. And this is going to bring up this information. The first thing I need to do is then become a co-owner of that application and initiate the share. So now if I go to, well, I can just go ahead and cancel this. And if I close this admin center and go to apps, now the application, or refresh here, I should say, now the application should appear in the list of apps that were deployed to the environment. Now I can go ahead and test it and do all the other things that I'm able to do normally and traditionally with any application. The only thing, or as a co-owner, I should be able to just add any customizations to this app, not to the core code, but at least as an addition to the app itself. So this was actually a very well documented step-by-step process to take an app from development to staging to production. And I hope you had a chance to enjoy this particular video, because I had tons of fun doing it. And in reality, there's a lot more to take into account. I'm going to do a couple follow-up videos on ALM from this series. There are a couple things that I want to talk about, service connections, etc., that will help you in building a solid deployment strategy. So thank you for your time and see you soon.